dependent of the physical base in which it's realized in the form of computers. So there's a sense in which this dualism of body and soul, or program and machine, which is present in the computer metaphor, and which Dennett may be alluding to, was built in right at the very beginning by Alan Turing, and one could even say that this was part of his motivation for doing it. It was to find a way of proving a kind of immortality without having God or anything to do with traditional religion. It was to find a kind of abstract mathematical basis for a sort of abstract immortality.
All the people we film in Friendly Hampstead in London will be dead in 100 years' time. But in North Andover, in the USA, Daniel Dennett explains patiently that this may not always necessarily be the case. The illusion of immortality, which all religion has always proclaimed, can, in principle, be replaced by true immortality. I have no idea what the confrontation of Sheldrake and Dennett will bring. This lady, 150 yards away from Sheldrake's house, what exactly is she painting? Is she painting what is there, or what should have been there? Again, I quote Stephen Jay Gould to Sheldrake. Gould, who writes that nature is non-moral, that nature offers no ethic to support us. If we need morality, we have to seek for it inside ourselves.
Well, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about questions of morality,
okay.
And so it's not...
But you're dealing with it every day.
Yes.
You're making everyday choices about morality.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm interested in the whole subject, but I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about how it relates to the uniquely human. You see, the thing is, a lot of secular humanists are very much into this speciesist thing. They have to prove that human beings are radically different from everything else in nature, and the usual things they use are consciousness and morality. These are, or tool making,
free will,
machine making. Well, these are the standard arguments, and they're used, of course, to justify the fact that it's wrong to kill people, but it's all right to kill cows to make hamburgers, or battery chickens to have Kentucky Fried Chicken. You've got to have some kind of justification for the way we behave. So I would say, though, that if you look at the natural world, that most of the things we think of as moral features are things that we can find pre-shadowed in many ways in the natural world. For example, parental care and affection, which are a basic aspect of responsibility. Moral responsibility towards children is a key part of all human societies. And when you look at the behavior of birds looking after their young, and animals in general, and the way they care for their young and raise them, you could say that here we see maybe an unconscious or instinctive, but we certainly see the principles of parental care and responsibility at work.
But when you're looking at caterpillars eating their own parents, then you can say, well, here we are back again with Darwin and his cruel, horribly cruel world.
Well,
it's where you're looking at.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether more caterpillars eat their parents than people kill other people. I mean, if you look at human wars, it's not a very impressive record for human beings being distinctly better than other animals in terms of not killing each other. In fact, I'd say we're probably worse than most in terms of our record in killing members of our own species. I think the problem, you see, is to take the moral as the distinctively human, is to take a theoretical argument. It's to fall into a kind of narcissism where we look at an idealized reflection of ourselves. If you look at the reality of human behavior, then you find brutal massacre and killing of members of our own species is part of what people have done for a long time, and the so-called modern civilized world has done more of it than most. And the recent Iraq war showed, it was considered perfectly all right to massacre with weapons of mass destruction tens of thousands of retreating soldiers, things that in the past would have been considered inconceivably brutal are now considered perfectly normal. And so there's no growth of morality, it seems to me, with the advance of technological civilization. And if you look at the actual practice of human beings, and you look, do human beings, on average, kill each other more or less than the members of other species? The answer is, I think they kill each other more than the members of most other species do.
Look, for instance, in the wolves.
Yes, and or look at it's very rare to find animals killing other members of their own species. But it's quite common to find human beings doing it, and modern civilized societies like our own are still, in Britain, still building weapons of mass destruction. Enormous increase going on at present in British nuclear armaments. Why? I mean, the capacity to destroy hundreds of millions of people, considered perfectly normal. In fact, it's being expanded. So I find the morality argument as a kind of species badge of honor not a very strong one. I mean, it's certainly the case that human beings...
But morality would make us unique.
Well, the trouble is that morality, as conceived by Enlightenment philosophers, seems to me a kind of abstraction. If you look at morality as practiced in traditional societies, it's not usually elevated into some enormous moral code. It's more in the question of custom or habit. And that, I think, is the natural state of human morality, and it's closer to the kind of implicit behavioral norms that we find in animal societies. Bees, wasps, ants, flocks of birds, all of them have ways of cooperating together. That means that the individual members of the society work together, usually fairly harmoniously, in a way that's mutually beneficial. And this we find in human societies. We're social animals, and as such, we find that our societies are influenced by social bonds and social norms, like any other social animal. We make it conscious, and we elevate it into the name of morality, but the word morality is quite a recent invention. I mean, in traditional human societies, the word morality isn't exactly used in our modern sense. So there are certain norms of behavior. You don't do certain kinds of things, and you can do other kinds of things, and if you do things that are prohibited, you're ultimately expelled from the society in one way or another. But I think this abstract notion of morality is not very helpful. That's my own feeling. The purpose of an individual in a traditional society is to live in accordance with the myths of the way the ancestors have lived. Innovation is not particularly relevant. In fact, it's a way of deviating from an established path that's been followed many times before. It's dangerous. Whereas our society has put a great emphasis on innovation and has correspondingly weakened the sense of following ancestral paths and customs, and therefore gives the sense that each new generation is somehow better, wiser, cleverer than the last. So our societies are full of problems of adolescent rebellion. You don't get this in traditional societies, because each generation now has to prove itself better, cleverer, more advanced than the last. And so this lack of rooting in tradition creates conditions where innovation can happen more readily, and that in turn weakens the influence of the past. And so our societies are evolving with a dissolution of the old social structures, hurtling into the future in a way that nobody can foresee where it's leading. The dissolution of traditional morality and traditional social and family patterns is something that's happening far faster than I think anyone imagined in the past, and will leave us with a kind of society that no one can really envisage in the future. I mean, if families fragment, if more and more children grow up outside the normal socializing influence of the family. Now in Britain, 25% of children are now being raised by single parents, mostly single mothers. In northern England, over 50% of children are now being born to parents who are not married, to mothers who are not married. And so the traditional family system is breaking down, and nobody has any idea, it's never happened before, what happens to society if the principal socializing influences on children are no longer present. And yet this is a logical outcome of the dissolution of all traditional forms of social order. And I don't think it's leading anywhere that most people would welcome or look forward to.
What do you expect?
Well, I don't know. I think that it's very hard to envisage how a society can be changed when many people within it lack the basic elements of socialization, of being brought within social forms, constraints and customs. And I think this is the problem of inner cities in the United States, where there's now large areas which are full